Let's put in a cast to the left. Watch my technique. Okay, dig it down to full depth and then pause. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just keeping my line bowed. I'm just sucking up the slack to keep a little bow in my line so I can still sense a bite if I get one. Okay, I felt it vibrate on that pull. I'm gonna 1, 2, 3, 4. Give it a pull. 1, 2, 3, 4. It felt clean. Okay, it's fouled. Fouled right there. So it was clean on the first 3 jerks and then it fouled. That gives me confidence that I can fish my bait's presentable for the first 3 jerks out. So let's cast as far as we possibly can over there. One more time to the left and then we'll try to the right and then we'll get out of here. If they don't bite in the first few casts, I'm not gonna sit here and grind for them. I wanna hit the beach. Okay, that felt good. 1, 2. Actually, I'm just gonna do a slow, steady retrieve. Pause, let it float. And then I'm about to give it a jerk, keeping my line just bowed so I can sense a bite here. Okay, I felt it vibrate, so I'm gonna just pause, bowed line, let it float. Okay, I'm gonna let it float a little longer and then we're gonna check on it. Checked on it, the water's dirty. I'm getting it out of there, fouled. Let's get out of there. 1 or 2 casts to the right, then I'm out of here. If they're looking for something to eat. Oh, I just saw bait. When my bait hit the water, I saw bait jump. So there's a little bit of bait in the water out there. That's a good sign. Oh, fouled. Fouled, guys. It's too dirty. You know what? The Texas rig is necessary right now. We got bait in the water. I think it's a good spot. There could be fish feeding. I think the Texas rig is the only way to fish right now. Let's try further to the right, and then that's it. We're out of here. All right, further to the right. Here we go. Pull. Yeah, vibrated. We're good. Just reeling in, just keeping my line taut. My line is bowed. Let's give it a jerk. Yeah, I felt it vibrate. We're good. We're fishing. Sense for a bite. Sense for a bite. Keep it bowed. Let it float. Sense for a bite. Sense for a bite. Let it float. Let it float. I think I'm fouled. Yep, fouled. Okay, let's do one more cast to the right and then we're out of here. Come on. You're either going to bite or you're not. Give it to me, baby. Jerk. Vibrating. Okay. Paw. Oh, what's that? No, that wasn't a fish. I made contact with some eelgrass right there. Yeah, I'm pulling through eelgrass. So this is a time where if I'm gonna be patient, I can let my bait float over that stuff. Yeah, and the water's not too dirty. Let's do it. Come on, one more cast and we're out of here. Come on, let's go. One more cast. We're gonna dig it down, let it float. Okay, I felt it vibrate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We should be about on the surface now. I felt it vibrate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We should be getting close to the surface now. I felt that eelgrass. That eelgrass is really, really shallow. It's like right on the surface. So I'm probably not even at the drop off now. It's okay. There could be fish in here, but yeah, I'm just pulling through tons of eelgrass here. All right. I want to get out of here. Water's too dirty anyways. Let's go for a walk. So whether you snag a stingray or you catch a short halibut, if you want to keep them in good shape, if you want to protect yourself, protect the fish, and protect your lure, here's what you do. You keep the fish right at the surface of the water. Give yourself that much slack. Right? The fish is just sitting right at the surface of the water. He's fine. You can grab your line with one hand for control, and then use your other hand to grab the hooks with the forceps. Oh, that hook's not even hooked. The tail is hooked a little bit. Let's go ahead, okay? Now it's just the front hook. He's gone. See that? I just grab the hook and shake. Done. Easy. So that's gonna protect the fish. So it's because if you bring a short halibut onto shore, it's gonna go swack, whack, 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 whack. It's gonna get brain damage from shaking his head and bouncing his head on the beach and banging against rocks. That's also gonna destroy your jerkbait because your jerkbait is getting whack, 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 whack on the rocks and on the beach. Because jerkbaits are fragile devices. You know, they're not like swim baits or jigs that you can just throw against a wall. And then that also protects you. If it's a stingray, you have control over it if it's just sitting on the surface of the water right there like that on the line. You can kind of hold it out arm's length. So that's how I recommend releasing short fish and stingrays basically. It's good to see you, man. Wow. Way too long. Fish dive. All right, we're here with the Santa Barbara Fishing Club. We're gonna walk out to the beach and do a little demonstration. We got Ryan right here. Ryan, what kind of fishing you do?
Mostly up at the lake.
Up at the lake?
Yeah, Kachuma Lake.
Kachuma?
Bass, yeah.
Are you interested in halibut fishing?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's my main target, so that's what I'll be sharing with you today. Buys those bare hooks, and we add our own lead. So we've got the 1/4 ounce, we've also got 3/8 ounce, and we've also got 1/2 ounce. So if you're out there on a float tube or a kayak, you might want to use the 1/2 ounce. You know, you could put a 1/2 ounce bullet weight in front of a 1/2 ounce hook. You got a whole ounce on your swim bait. You can go deep. So it's really the most versatile bait because you can just change your configuration of the weight on the hook and the weight on the bait. Yeah, I'll make a cast and just show you guys how I fish it. So to avoid snagging, we always want to keep our line taut. Not really tight, but taut. When I fish the Texas rig, I keep a bow in my line. Okay, I keep it moving very slowly. And this is pretty much it, guys. So this is pretty much all there is to it.
That's slow.
Yeah, just crawl it along the bottom like a snail and just keep picking up the slack. If you get too much slack in your line like this, if the current brings it, go ahead and pick it up. And I just keep a light bow in my line, so that way what I'm really trying to do is get it to sink, sink, sink. Just keep it on the bottom. Anytime it comes up over a deep spot, I want it to get down in there. And I keep my rod tip pointed almost straight up. This is a really comfortable way to fish, by the way. I'll show you. If you're looking to save energy, you can just fish it like this. See how what I'm doing is, this takes I could fish like this all day long. I mean, like this. And when I don't know how many of you guys have felt a halibut bite a swim bait like this, but it's such a distinct hit. It's just like thump, and it's just thump. So your line bounces, your rod tip bounces, and you know you just got bit. And then all there is to it is wind down and whack. And when you're in this position, it feels so awesome. It's like thump, well, boom, because you have your rod butt right here. You have so much control and so much power. If you start fishing Texas rig, you'll discover that not only is it the most versatile lure, it's also the most complex. There's many nuances to it, like when you want a little more weight up front or when you want all the weight in the back. How to do your retrieve. There's a lot of nuances to it. So you just got to spend time fishing this lure in this style, and you'll learn more and more through experience. But when we get to the classroom, I've written up some short information which will help to just sort of lay it all out on the table for you. And you can get this stuff, the Battlestar jerkbait as well as the XLS swim bait hooks, and the rib baits are coming soon, at Hook, Line, and Sinker, and also at Blue Water Hunter right here. So they're available to you. Also down at Eric's Tackle in Ventura, and if you're up in San Luis, you could go to Been There Caught That. And I'm just, you know, if you find a tackle shop that doesn't carry this stuff, ask them for it, please, for Battlestar Tackle. Because we're just trying to get it everywhere, available to everyone. All right, thanks. Off the beach on the Battlestar XLS hook. So it's really all about balance. It's not that I want a fast sink or a slow sink. It's just that when a bait sinks slowly, it's a better presentation for fishing in general. And when a bait drags on bottom, if it's nose heavy or if it's really heavy, it's more likely going to snag.
This is more of a halibut setup?
Yeah, this is definitely exactly what it's for. That halibut would be my main target. You know, that's what I'm basically out there looking for. I'll take a rockfish, a calico, a white sea bass along the way if I'm lucky enough to get bit, but I'm really just hunting the halibut is what I'm primarily looking for.
What's the size on that?
This is a 4-point, this is a 5/8, this is a 5-inch actually. This is a 5-inch rib bait. It's basically modeled after the 4.8 Kitech. So mine will be just like this, but it'll have ribs through the groove so we can bury the hook tip in those ribs to hold it in position. And then it's also gonna be a little skinnier, not quite so fat, because I wanna save all this hook gap for the fish. I don't want the bait getting in the way. I want to get a nice deep hook set. So I made mine a little thinner, and I also added a bulge right here because this tends to tear. When you get bit, that tail tends to tear. So I added a bulge right where you put the hook through to add a little extra integrity right there. We'll have those swim baits here in a matter of 2 months, maybe 3 months max.
On your website?
Yeah, we'll have them on the website and then in all the shops too. I'm working on LA, Orange County, San Diego, and the thing is, nobody down there knows me. I don't have a community down there, so I need my buddies to go walk into the shops and ask for it and say, hey, get this. I want to buy this stuff here.
Hey, what's up? This is Matt, Vince.
What's up, Matt? I'm Vince. Nice to meet you.
Oh, like a fish you want to catch.
Well, a couple years ago, my name's Scott. Nice to meet y'all. My first meeting.
So like I said, my motto is, if the water is clean, fish the Battlestar 115. If the water's a mess, fish the XLS, the Texas rig. And we'll get into the Texas rig in a bit, but I want to give you my, I'll just read this for you. So the Battlestar 115, this lure is designed to cast really far, dives about 3.5 feet, and slowly floats. So I love fishing jerkbaits because they tend to get bit, and they tend to get a pretty good hook set to landing ratio as well, as long as the hooks are sharp. Here's the new glow pink sardine. Yeah, I just kind of pass them down one at a time so that way people can see all the colors. The thing about it is, I hate snagging and losing a new jerkbait. So we made our, I already told you, we got it dialed in. We made a unique mold. We got it just the way you want it. It dives a maximum of 3.75 feet. Let's talk about the slow float and slow retrieve, okay? We observed the float rate of this bait. I don't remember how many seconds seconds it took to float per foot. I have it documented, I don't remember. But what I did figure out is that I count to about 4 or 5 to let it float. So I cast it out, I dig it all the way down the full depth, and then I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So 4 or 5, and it's pretty much made its way back to the surface at that point. And then you can dig it back down again. And what you're getting is you're fishing the water column down 4 feet, 2 feet, you're fishing the whole thing. So essentially we get the same benefit of a suspending bait because it spends so much time in the water column as it's slowly floating. But we also get the advantage of not snagging on bottom. Okay, so as long as the bait has the tendency to rise up, we're gonna have the tendency of not getting snagged as much. If you do bang the bottom on a retrieve, like if you feel the bottom, this is a great opportunity now to maybe even on your next cast to pause and let that bait float up and then dig it back down. So now you're swimming that bait over the structure sort of gracefully, the way a more natural presentation than just tearing through eelgrass and tearing through rocks and stuff. Or you could even rip it down half depth. You know, if you're fishing really shallow water, like one time at Goleta, I was fishing and it was so shallow, and so I was just doing these little half rips and just digging it down and letting it, pausing it and digging it down and pausing and letting it float. And I was catching halibut just like that in like 2 feet of water with the thing. I also recommend experimenting with a steady, slow retrieve. That totally catches fish too, just a nice steady retrieve. You can fish that Battlestar 115 pretty slow and it will wobble. Sometimes I even glide it in without a wobble. I'll dig it down and then just glide it so slow so it's just moving towards me. It's not even wobbling. Fish are gonna bite it, you know, because it looks like a fish moving through the water. So just try all these different retrieves. Keep it in the strike zone. Since the Battlestar is snag avoidant, it's like the most snag avoidant jerkbait option in the surf there. For fishing the heavy structure beaches, it allows us to confidently fish slower. Because if I was to throw a sinking bait or even a suspending bait with that current and stuff, it's more probable that the current's going to sweep it into something that's going to get snagged. But if it's on its way up, it's going to get snagged less. So it allows us to slow down and keep our bait in the strike zone more. So that's kind of like, it's no wonder why it catches so many fish, is because we're able to keep it in the strike zone longer. There's a lot of fishermen who will tell you that that's the difference that makes the difference, is the longer you keep your bait in the strike zone, the more fish you catch. Long casting. Another added benefit of the 115, it casts really far. With an offshore wind, from behind, it's just gonna go too far. It's gonna cast too far. You don't need to be out that far out, really. But even in a moderate headwind, I'm still always really surprised at how far I can whip it out there. At some point it gets too windy and I'm like, okay, not worth it. But I'm always surprised to see how far it will cast through the wind. Okay, so one tip is if you want to get maximum distance, cast a little bit on an angle in the direction that the wind's blowing. So you can bow your line, just lower your rod tip, and notice which direction your slack goes, that bow. Is it going to the left or is it going to the right? If it goes to the left, do a 45-degree angle to the left. That thing will cast pretty far. It'll cut through the wind and you'll get more distance. If you cast directly against the wind, you won't cast as far, but your line will stay straighter on the retrieve, because when you cast this way, you get a longer cast, but you're also going to end up with this big bow in your line. So it's up to you how you want to fish, where you're trying to cast to, where you're trying to cast from. I like to cast with the wind a bit and get a little more distance. I don't mind the bow in my line. I'm keeping my line pretty taut. I'm keeping my bait moving. If I get a bite, I'll sense it. I'll wind down and set the hooks. Dirty water, fouled bait. Yeah, when you fish a jerkbait, check to see if you feel it wobble. Depending on how sensitive your rod is. Some rods are, you probably don't even feel, I don't know, do you feel the bait wobble on that SST? I'm surprised. With my Okuma Hawaiian 10.7, I cannot feel the jerkbait wobble at the beginning of the retrieve. When it's all the way out there, I can't feel it. When it gets about halfway in, then I can start to feel it when it's wobbling. I don't like that. I like to be able to feel if my bait is wobbling or not. That's what tells me whether it's fouled or not. That matters out here. Maybe not so much up north in Oceania when I'm perch fishing, where the water's crystal clear and clean, but if the water's dirty, there's eelgrass, kelp like we have out here, you want to be able to feel your bait wobble, because that's what lets you know whether it's clean or fouled. So if you feel it wobble, it's presentable, keep fishing. If you don't feel it wobble, the bait has picked up some seaweed, it's fouled, it's not presentable. So in that case, reel it in as fast as you can, clean it back up, and get it back out there. If you pick up weed all the way out there at the beginning of your retrieve, try short casting, because the water close to you might be clean. And that's often all it takes to catch a halibut, is just a 20-foot cast. You might have clean water right here, dirty water out there. There's no sense in just dragging weed over their heads. So if you're just picking up weed, make a short cast, try that. Always fish with new sharp hooks, okay? So after many hours of using any jerkbait, the hook tips will begin to dull from rubbing against the body of the lure. That's why you get hook rash. After you've used a lure for 10 hours, you'll notice that there's a pattern where the hook tips are rubbing against the bait. Okay, so that means your hook tips are getting worn out. Go ahead and feel them. They're not as sticky sharp as they used to be, right? So check your hook tips back at home before you go fishing. Make sure they're super sticky sharp. When I go perch fishing up north, I always make sure that my tail hook is a new hook. For halibut fishing, I think I would just go ahead and make sure that all three are razor sharp. By the way, be careful with the hooks. Those freaking hooks will send you to the hospital if you're not careful, okay? So this is really important. When you catch a fish, don't put your hand down and grab the jerkbait. Don't put your hand anywhere near that jerkbait while that bait is in. Do this, you know, stay away. What you want to do then is grab some forceps or some needle nose pliers.
No.
Hemostat.
Yeah, forceps. I use hemostat. I call them forceps. And that's what I use too, and that's the safest way to do it. So do not attempt to remove those hooks by hand unless that fish is dead. So next point, treat every jerkbait like it's made of glass. I don't think there's any other jerkbait maker that's gonna come out and tell you that. Nobody wants to tell you, oh, jerkbaits are delicate. You know, you can take a swim bait or a metal spoon and bang it against a wall all day, whatever. It's not going to go out of tune. It's not going to break in half or nothing like that. Jerkbaits are made out of ABS plastic. They're hollow. And there's components inside them to keep them balanced perfectly. So it's different. If you bang that thing against a wall, it could crack. It could go out of tune. So just like my guitar, I've been playing guitar for years. I always treat the neck of my guitar like it's made out of glass. It's not made out of glass. It's made out of wood. People bang their guitars up all the time, whatever, right? But I always treat my neck like it's made of glass because I respect it. And I do the same thing with my jerkbaits, and I encourage you to do the same. It'll last longer that way. So also, if you drag a halibut up onto the beach and it has that jerkbait in its mouth and it goes, that's basically just banging your lure on the ground, and it could hit rocks and that could crack your bait. So if it's a short fish, if you're reeling it in, you say, this fish is sublegal, it's not going to be a keeper. Don't even drag. I encourage you to not even drag it up onto the beach. Keep it in the water. The fish is safer, okay? Because we want that fish to live and grow so we can catch it when it's keeper. The lure is safe. It's not going to get broken. And you can also use your forceps to just safely pop that fish off and it swims off, so you're safer too.
If you drag it up on the beach, it's more likely to snag you in the hand. It's more likely to kick sand in your eyes. So it's easier to release a fish just by holding it on the surface of the water. Any questions on jerkbait fishing or the Battlestar?
Your current favorite?
My current favorite? The silver sardine. It was the first color, and it's the one that I love to come back to. I think that it catches every species in pretty much any conditions. Okay, so you guys want to hear my take on the Texas rigs? I wrote this up. It's on the back of the card, so you can take it home and read it and study. I really encourage you to read that. Like, anytime you want to learn about Texas rig fishing, just read the back of this thing. There's a lot of good content in there, and you want to absorb it. So, our greatest challenge out here in surf fishing is dirty water. Loose bits of kelp and eelgrass floating around, fouling our baits. The second is snagging on rocks when we're fishing the heavy structure. So this is why we fish the modified Texas rig. And it's modified because we're putting the weight on the hook now, and we're using these big fat swim baits. Whereas the original Texas rig was just a plastic worm with a EWG worm hook. Now we got these screw locks and weight on the hook and all this stuff, so we call it the modified Texas rig. The Battlestar Extra Long Shank XLS hook is to be used with ribbed swim baits. We're going to be coming out in a couple months. We're going to come out with the Battlestar 5-inch rib bait. It's just like the Kitech, except it's a little skinnier, which saves us some of that hook gap, because I want that hook gap to be available for catching fish, not just stuffing through baits. And it also going to have ribs across the groove. So like I showed you guys outside, all these companies make these rib baits and there's no ribs in the groove. And so the hook is supposed to just stay there and just rest there, but in reality it pops up and it catches weed. So I started burying it under a couple of the ribs to the side of the groove, and that works much better, but it's not what I really want. Is I want the ribs in the groove, so I can bury it under 2 or 3 of those, and it'll hold it in the groove, totally weedless, and still ready to get that bite. It's because the hook tip is actually not buried in anything. As soon as that fish bites down, that hook tip is ready and available for them. So bury the hook tip in 1 or 2 of the small ribs. This renders your bait extremely weedless, and you still get a good hook set. The best presentation is lightweight, slow, low, steady, with a pop and a pause now and then. And those pops help you to avoid snagging too. So if you think that it's snaggy at all, you know, a little pop here and there, just get your line nice and tight and kind of pops it up and hopefully avoids a snag. Another way to avoid snags, use lighter weight. Now you can swim it slowly through that lower water column without even touching bottom, and it's just slowly swimming. That's another way to do it. So, and in that way, in that regard, I'm talking about going down to 1/4 of an ounce, because I almost always fish 3/8 of an ounce. But sometimes, in the right conditions, when it's calm enough, I'll go down to 1/4 of an ounce. And sometimes when there's more current or wind or whatever, rough conditions, I'll go up to a 1/2 ounce, and it depends on what I'm targeting. If I'm targeting a striped bass, they're a lot more tolerant to a faster presentation. Sure, I'll go 1/2 ounce and increase my rate of retrieve. Further cast, faster retrieve for striped bass. With halibut, I like to go lightweight, a slow, low, steady, a pop and a pause once in a while. Basically, the rule of thumb here is go as slow as you can without getting snagged. So the slower you retrieve your bait, the more likely it's gonna get fully inhaled for a deep hook set. This has been my observation for the last couple years. I've seen my buddies, I see them doing a medium retrieve, and I'm not gonna tell him how to fish. I'm just gonna keep fishing the way I fish. And he's getting his tails bit off. He goes, oh, I got a bite, and the tail's ripped off. And that doesn't happen to me. That's only happened to me like a handful of times ever. And I'm getting these thumps, boom, where everything just goes boom, and then poof, I'm landing more fish and bigger fish. So I think that the slow retrieve will actually catch you bigger fish too. Apparently, I had a buddy who caught 30 halibut one year. He was up to 30 that year and not a single legal. And I was catching a legal every 2nd or 3rd fish. And we fished the same spots. So go figure, you know? The more current or wind, the more weight you're gonna need to use, okay, to get that control. I would say so. The more weight you use and the slower you retrieve, the more you may snag on bottom. So if that thing has more gravity force dragging along the bottom, it's more likely going to get wedged into a rock and get snagged. The less weight you use, or the faster you retrieve, the less you're going to snag. Okay, because the less weight you use, it's just so gently dragging on bottom. In fact, there's a spot in Avila. We fish really calm water, deep, but calm. So calm that we fish 1/4 ounce. And we just wait for it to get down on bottom. If I fish 3/8 of an ounce, I pull up this grassy stuff on the bullet weight or on the front of the bait. We go down to a 1/4 of an ounce, it stops happening. So this thing is actually just grazing over the weed without picking it up. That tiny little difference of 1/8 of an ounce makes such a big difference. So finding the perfect balance of weight and retrieve is really kind of an art. It takes practice. It's very rewarding when you get to like, oh, I think I should go up 1/8 of an ounce. I'm going to go with the 1/2 ounce, and you get results. Or you know what? I think I'm going to go down 1/8 of an ounce, and you're just making those adjustments based on the conditions you're observing, and it's a really rewarding experience. So consider the amount of current and depth and how snaggy the bottom is, and that will help you to decide how much weight to use and how fast to retrieve. So use the lightest weight possible and retrieve as slow as possible. That's the general rule. If you are snagging on bottom, you should either increase your retrieve rate a little, just to keep your line a little tighter, or keep it from dragging on the bottom, or reduce the weight a little bit. And if you do reduce the lighter weight, you're gonna have to slow down your retrieve a little bit, so that it sinks. I like fishing the 1/4 ounce hook all by itself. I do. It's just very rare that the conditions will allow. It's extremely light. It sinks very slow. You can swim it slow and gently glide over everything on bottom. It's a deadly presentation. You'll probably never snag, and you'll get good hook sets because it's going to get fully inhaled moving that slow. I really think the fish hit with more confidence when it's moving slow. I think that's it. Is when it's moving fast, I think they just want to immobilize it. Let's just grab it by the tail and stop it, and then I'll make my second chomp and swallow it down. And that's why we're getting our tails bit off. But I think that if you just slow down, they're just going to suck the whole thing up. At least that's been my experience. But fishing such lightweight, 1/4 ounce requires very little current because it takes forever to sink. I mean, you just gotta wait for that sucker to get down. When there's moderate current, increase your weight to 3/8 of an ounce. You can fish 3/8. You can fish the 3/8 hook as it is with all the just 3/8 of an ounce weight on the hook, and that's a very snagless option. Okay, so when all the weight is back on the hook, it's gonna have that more horizontal orientation. It's gonna butt bounce off everything, and it's not gonna snag as much. Or in dirty water, if the water gets dirty, for a more weedless design, I use the 1/4 ounce hook, and I put an 1/8 ounce bullet weight on top. This is my go-to, and this is what I recommend you guys do when you're fishing for halibut out here. You'll catch rockfish, you'll catch calico, you'll catch white sea bass along the way too, but I'm basically hunting for halibut the whole time I'm doing this. And if you use that 1/4 ounce hook with the 1/8 ounce bullet weight, and even throw a bobber stopper in front so that it keeps it controlled like that, that's my favorite way to fish. It's also very snagless because most of the weight is still on the back of the hook. So you've got a 1/4 ounce back here and 1/8 up front. So most of the weight's still on the back, so it's still very snagless. Not as snagless as the 3/8 hook. With that, just like we observed on the dockouts there, you saw like when I put the 1/4 ounce hook on front, it nosedives. So it does snag a little more frequently in that configuration, but it's not like a big problem. I don't snag a whole lot. And if I do, then I'll just pull out my 3/8 ounce hook and fish that in that spot if I want to keep fishing in that spot. Or I'll change spots if it's too snaggy. There's some spots where you learn, don't cast right there and don't stand here and cast there because you'll get snagged every time. There's some spots, I don't know what it is, if there's a crab pot down there with about 100 lucky crabs on it, or what the heck is going on.
Before you go lure diving.
Yeah, so there's some spots that you just don't want to fish with anything.
You should talk a little bit about what you do when you do snag.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Let's do that. And I just had another idea too. Rocks that have vegetation growing on them, you're probably going to get your bait back because you're not really snagging on the rock. You're snagging on some weed, and the weed's going to give with straight 30-pound braid. If you use straight 30-pound braid, the weed tears and you get your bait back. If there's no weed on the rock, oh, it's another story. If you snag in between that on that, you might not get your bait back.
But
It
you
happens.
might too.
You might. And if you do snag like that and you pull it and you get your bait back, check your hook tip.
But
Check your
first
hook
you
tip.
have to get it off. So how do you get it off?
All right, so the first thing I do is I'll stand there and tut, 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 tut. Is it gonna come off for me?
No.
Come on, keep my life easy. Nope, not usually. So then I'll bow my line just a little bit and walk all the way down the beach as far as I'm willing to walk and out as far as I can. I'm trying to get a side angle on it now so that it's down there and try to bam. Sometimes that'll do the trick and it'll just come right loose and you'll get it back. If that doesn't work, then I have to ask myself, am I willing to walk all the way down the beach in the other direction?
Yeah.
Okay, so it really gets the heart beating.
When you're using these, that's what you do.
Yeah, then you when you're using that, it's worth it.
90% of the time, if you do that, you're gonna get these back.
Yeah.
If you just take some time and you pull on it at different angles, then it will come off.
Yeah. I'll let you guys in on another little trade secret with jerkbaits, okay? People always ask, why do you use these flimsy little hooks that bend so easy? First of all, I've never bent out a hook on a fish. I've caught 4-foot angel sharks on those things. You set your drag, and your drag's gonna peel before the hook bends. But with that 30-pound straight braid, usually if you're snagged on a rock, it's one barb. It's not usually like it's all like on a fish, like, oh, this hook here and that hook there. It's usually just one barb on the rock. And with 30-pound braid, if it comes down to that, if you can't get it off any other way, you wrap, what I do is I'll put my rod tip over, I'll open my bail, put my rod tip over there, grab my line, wrap it around my hand, and walk backwards, okay? And that way there's no pressure on my reel or my rod. I'm not damaging my gear. I might cut my hand wide open on the braid, but I wear gloves, so that doesn't happen. So I wrap and I pull. And those hooks, that hook will bend then. And you'll get your bait back, and then you can take your forceps and bend it right back and keep fishing, or you can change the bait, put on a new one, and change that hook when you get home. It's up to you. As long as the hooks are still sharp, I'll keep fishing them personally.
When you say 30-pound straight braid, you're not using a quick clip, you're tying it straight on the,
Yes.
the lure?
You could use a quick clip if you want. Okay, for the jerkbaits, I highly recommend it. Like I said, I treat jerkbaits like they're made out of glass. So I'll take that tactical clip and I'll tie my Palomar knot and I'll test it on the clip. The bait is still in my bag. He has nothing to do with it. He's not getting his nose yanked on.
Right.
But once that clip of my knot is tested, then I can just clip it on and start fishing.
50.
Now, if you ever feel uncertain about how much weight to use, because a lot of people get intimidated by Texas rig, don't get intimidated. Just use 3/8 of an ounce and just go fishing. You know, I fish the 3/8 ounce 90% of the time. Keep in mind, bigger swim baits require more weight. Smaller swim baits require less weight to get them to sink at the same rate. Another thing I want to say about the XLS hook, it's not an extra wide gap hook. It's a wide gap hook, but it's not a owner beast hook. So I wouldn't use the XLS hook with any of these big, tall, open pore swim baits. You know, it's got to be something kind of slender with a groove in it or something like that. We want to save that hook gap for the fish. So use it with the rib baits. Use it with the Kitech Fat or the Battlestar 5-inch rib baits that are coming out soon. I also like the Rage Swimmer. It's made by Strike King. Strike King Rage Swimmer, and I love it in green pumpkin. That's what I hooked my 4-foot white sea bass on that I lost.
Did you give up on lead heads? Or you
Yeah, I did.
gave up on them?
You know, I like war baits. And the dudes who have been fishing for ages just fish like a lead head swim bait with an open pore swim bait, and they catch tons of fish on them. Okay, I don't know how you guys deal with the dirty water like that. I had to go weedless. I had to figure some way to fish in ways, but I gave up on the lead heads because they nosedive, and for me, dragging on bottom is getting snagged. But I think with a bait like that, you can swim it through the water column. Because those big open pore swim baits, there's more water resistance, so you can use more weight. So they often use like a 3/4 ounce or even a whole ounce with one of those big, paddle tail swim baits.
A bunch of them in the bottom.
There you go. So with these Texas rigs, there's not as much water resistance there, and we use lighter weight. And they cast a mile, so don't think that you're gonna cast twice as far with 3/4 as you do 3/8. You guys saw how far I was casting out there, that little 3/8. It casts really far. That's more about your rod and your line, and how much line you have on your spool too. Make sure your spool is full. The sucker just wants to unload line. Just. So now, when there's a lot of current or wind or depth, you could consider fishing the 1/2 ounce. When the water is clean enough, you could just fish the 1/2 ounce hook. So we've got this available in 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce, and 1/2 ounce. It's
Any smaller?
No, if you want an 1/8 ounce hook, just get the VMC drop dead hook. So let me explain. That's how I discovered these things. I was fishing the VMC drop dead with an 1/8 ounce on the back and a 1/4 ounce up front. So I got my 3/8 ounce. And I loved the hook. It was getting tons of hook sets. I was catching tons of fish with the hook. I love the hook. Just love it. It's the longest shank swimbait hook that I ever found. That's what caught my eye to begin with. But then just catching fish after fish, I was sold on it. But the thing is, with most of the weight up front, I was snagging. So I called VMC and I said, hey man, can I buy a lot of those bare raw hooks and put my own weights on them with my own logo and package them and sell them? And they're like, yeah. So I did. And that's how the Battlestar XLS hook came to be. So VMC offers the drop dead hook out of an 1/8 ounce. Battlestar offers the same hook with 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce, 1/2 ounce. Cool? Yeah, consider 1/2 ounce if there's a lot of current, a lot of depth, or if there's some wind. So when the water's clean, you could just fish the 1/2 ounce hook just by itself. If you need a more weedless design, you could use the 3/8 ounce hook with the 1/8 ounce bullet weight. That bullet weight acts like a scoop on the front of a train. It sheds the weed. You have this dynamic design where there is nowhere for the weed to get caught on. There's nowhere on there. It's just streamlined, you know? It's dynamic, hydrodynamic.
And I think with a bobber stopper too, that probably.
That's an interesting point. I wondered about that, and I think we've had enough observation now. You noticed that too?
Yeah.
I noticed that. Robert Bailey noticed that too. He mentioned that when I use the bobber stopper, it tends to collect weed even less.
Yeah.
So yeah, putting that bobber stopper in the front, I think that's a good idea. The only place left for weed to collect is on the bend of the hook, and it does happen. And if we can find a solution to that, please let me know. You could also do a 1/4 ounce hook with a 1/4 ounce weight, and now you have your weight balanced. It's up to you how you want to just know the more weight you put forward, the more it's going to go vertical and nosedive, and more likely to get snagged. But you'll feel the bottom, you'll sense it. Sometimes for scouting, I like to do that. When I'm scouting an area, I like a little more weight up front so I can feel the bottom. What's down there? Rocks, eelgrass? I don't know. Because if you fish with all the weight on the hook, like 3/8 of an ounce with all the weight on the hook, you don't feel nothing. You don't snag. You're fishing. You catch fish, but you don't feel the bottom.
Do you prefer to be on the bottom or just above?
I like to drag on bottom if I can. I prefer to drag on bottom and I mean like this. Just ever so slowly. And when that thing comes by and that big butt is just laying there, there's just no way for them to say no. It's just too easy of a meal, and they're gonna inhale it on the first bite. Yeah, because it's moving so slow. Yeah, you can't go wrong with any of these configurations. Just experiment. You'll learn the advantages and disadvantages. You know, you'll learn what conditions to use them in. So,
you catch perch on them?
Huh?
You catch perch on them?
Surprising. I wouldn't use them for perch fishing specifically, intentionally, but I have caught a bunch of slabs on them.
And when you catch them, they're big.
The big 14 inchers will actually, you know, if they bite it in the right spot, they get hooked. So, any questions on the Texas rigging? I think I covered it all. I think it's all in there. Cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much for letting me do this. Thanks for asking me to do this. I've never done anything like this before for the fishing, for Battlestar or any kind of fishing group.
Dinner bell.
You're bringing up a great point that I missed, is that the halibut like to hear the bait coming. So that's why a pop and a pause is a good thing to do sometimes. When you pop your swim bait, it just little bit like, I'm over here, you know.
How many of your hookups come on the sink?
On the drop? I've had I've definitely got, like I've got hit on the drop. Like sometimes it seems as soon as it hit the water, I've had halibut jump on it. And on the drop, I've had probably less than 10% of my bites.
Really?
Yeah, most of my bites will be mid-retrieve during this slow, steady retrieve, just dragging on bottom like a snail. All of the sudden, my line goes boom, and my rod tip goes boom, and I know I just got thumped. And I could set the hook immediately, or I could reel down. Whatever. That fish has it in its mouth, and he's probably already hooked.
What typically, how do you fan cast?
I do fan cast because when you're crawling around on these slippery rocks, it takes a lot of energy to move from point A to point B. So I'm gonna make a few casts from here before I take the energy to make my next leap. Yeah, I fish all angles. Sometimes I fish horizontally. Yeah, they'll. I mean,
at night they don't like. You can get right up to them.
So fight, flight, freeze, halibut freeze. That's what they're programmed to do. They'll just sit there and let you walk right by. But when you do get a little too close, they take off. I will tell you this story. I was fishing this spot, tons of surfers. It was ridiculous. It was my birthday. There's all these surfers, and we're standing on the sandbar, and it just drops into this trough. And we're like, we had spent 3 or 4 hours fishing up the beach, no bites. I was going, you guys, the fish aren't here. Maybe overnight they all got pushed down to one side of the beach. Maybe all the bait was down there. Let's go fish either to the right or the left. Come on. So we went to the left. We found this sandbar. It dropped off. We started fishing. We started getting bites. But there's all these surfers. I'm like, this is going to drive me crazy. Should we keep fishing? There's a surfer wades through the hole, and then we make a cast, and we get a bite. I'm like, dude, that surfer didn't spook the fish. Then a surfer surfs by, and we make a cast, and we get a bite. That surfer didn't spook that fish. They're laying low, letting people walk around, surf around, waiting for bait to come by. They're so dumb. They're not spooked. They're not going to take off just because you're swimming around. But when you get too close, when you almost step on them, then they just take off.
Like right where the eelgrass ends.
Let's talk about how deep you catch halibut. I've caught halibut in 12 inches of water. I've caught 28-inch halibut in 12 inches of water. So don't overlook the pockets right in front of you. You know, I had the habit of just stomping out there and getting deep and fishing, and it was a big mistake. I've learned that fish the water before you step into it. It's amazing how shallow they'll get. They're here to spawn. The reason they're on the beach is to spawn. They need warm water. They're gonna be in the warmest spot. That's why we find them in these protected areas. The water's warmer there. And that's where their eggs are gonna have the most success rate, is in warmer water. They'll still try to spawn in the winter just because they have the hormones going, but their product, you know, it won't be successful spawn. A lot of those fish will die. A lot of those fish will die because it's too cold for them to incubate and grow. But they're here for the warm water so they can make babies. And they're here all year long for that same reason. They're just much less active in the colder water. They're gonna feed less, bite less. But like I said, they're here to spawn, but while they're here to spawn, they gotta eat. And that's why they move up into 12 inches of water. I don't think they're in 12 inches of water to lay eggs or anything like that. I don't know. But I think they're chasing bait up into those. They're hunting. They're putting themselves in a position where they know if I just lay down next to this rock with its eelgrass on it, eventually some bait fish are going to come get into that eelgrass, and I'm going to snatch one. So, yeah, fish shallow and fish deep. They're everywhere. And they're a real problem. We got to clean them up.